Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is Susan Ryan. I'm the Senior Director for the Greenhouse Project. And today's topic, I don't say lightly, this is a hot topic. It's workforce. We did a webinar some time ago, and we did a poll among the attendees asking them to rate kind of the topics that seem to percolate for them in order of significance. And by far, workforce was the one that really kept leaders up at night. So no wonder we wanted to do something that would really be relevant and applicable to people that are dealing and grappling with these issues every day. Before we start the webinar, I want to remind our participants in today's webinar that you are in listen-only mode, so that you will not be able to communicate with anybody until the end of the broadcast. At the end of our webinar, there is a question box, and if you type your questions in that box, I will read them to our presenters today so that they will be able to take your questions. And we will do that at the very end of this webinar. So if you've got questions, make sure you write them down and that you submit them at the end of the webinar. So today's topic, as I said, is workforce, and the title is Best Practices in Fostering an Engaged Workforce. You know, I think what I've appreciated so much when I think about workforce, there's how do we measure it? How do we know we're really having the impact that we want on our workforce? How can we really create quality jobs that are really about spurring learning and growth opportunities that will yield employee engagement? And thinking about employee engagement versus staff satisfaction, we want folks that are fully engaged and really committed to the organization. And I really can't think of a better group of people than our panel today to kind of tackle this topic. And I'm going to introduce them as they are listed on the screen. Julie Hoffman is someone that I met years ago through the Greenhouse Project. She is the Executive Director for Martha Coker Home. Julie has been there for over 30 years, or I should say a part of Methodist Senior Services, and she is a licensed nursing home administrator. Merrin Canton has been with Methodist Senior Services for 5 years as their VP for Human Resources. Now, unless you think that's an easy job, I was shocked when I read that Methodist has over 1,100 employees in 12 locations in Mississippi. So it's quite a daunting task, Merrin, in my opinion. But Merrin comes well equipped with 30 years in healthcare human resources. And last but certainly not least is Nikki Rineer. Nikki is the president of Hollaran Consulting for almost 8 years. Hollaran works with nonprofit organizations and their partners to conduct community research and to successfully integrate findings into strategic planning and community benefit activities. I heard Nikki speak at a conference in May, and it was so compelling that I immediately went up and said, "You've got to do a webinar for us." And when I understood the association and the work that Hollaran was doing with Methodist Senior Services, it seemed like a likely combination and a compelling webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn everything over to you, Nikki, to kind of lead us through the presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan. What a privilege it is to be with this group of individuals and all the work that you all are doing across the nation, really, to impact older adults and how they have the opportunity to age well, no matter where they're located. And so we are just excited to have this opportunity to talk with both Julie and Merrin. It's really going to be an opportunity for us to explain what's going on in their organization at Martha Coker in particular. And, you know, as I was speaking with them earlier today, I talked a lot about, I speak with many organizations about the fact that because we have so many challenges with workforce, we want that magic bullet. We want to know exactly what's happening out in the community, and we want to know what 12 things we can do that if we mirrored those, we would create a really highly engaged culture within our own organization. And it's not so much about the magic bullet, but it's more about what I reflect on as what I call the secret sauce. So as you think about, finding that perfect recipe, oftentimes we have to try different portions of ingredients and see how it all works together. And that really creates that magic that's happening in a highly successful organization like what we're going to see here with Martha Coker and their results. So today is really all about allowing them to tell their story, what we're seeing. We'll talk about how we review it, how we are measuring their success, and then they're going to give you the elements of their particular secret sauce here today. And so with that, I want to tee it up and just allow them to start with some background as to how things are working. So Merrin, at this point, I'm going to hand this part over to you and allow you to talk about MSS and how that looks. And then Julie's going to take it over and tell us some specifics about the demographics at the Martha Coker location.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Julie and I are excited about this opportunity, and on behalf of Methodist Senior Services, we hope this is helpful to everyone, and certainly hope you have a lot of questions at the end for us. But just a little bit of background on the greenhouse model and kind of how we came to be a greenhouse organization. Methodist Senior Services, currently, as Nikki or Susan said, we have 12 locations across the state of Mississippi. Not all are greenhouses, but we do have quite a number of greenhouses. And as you are aware, that greenhouse, the model, provides a home for our elders that is a home environment that is very similar to, we hope, what maybe their family home was. And so that's the benefit. It's very elder-centered as opposed to an institution, the old institution like a nursing home. And anyway, it's very elder-centered, and we try and focus on what the elder wants and needs in that environment. Currently, Methodist has 19 greenhouse homes at our various locations, some in Tupelo, some in Yazoo City, Raymond, Mississippi, and Gulfport. And then in 2020, we will be breaking ground for a new greenhouse facility we're really excited about at Wesley Meadows, which is in Hernando, Mississippi, which is a really booming part of Mississippi. So we're really excited about that. Just a little history that we're very proud of. Methodist Senior Services was the first organization to provide greenhouses in the country. So we were the first. And Steve McAlilly, who is our president, who's not with us today, but he connected with Dr. Bill Thomas. And at that point, Methodist Senior Services, the board of Traceway campus, which is in Tupelo, was about to launch construction for a new nursing home type of facility, more of an institutionalized type nursing home there in Tupelo. And Steve connected with Bill Thomas, and they talked about the greenhouse model. And that is how Methodist Senior Services here in Tupelo became the first greenhouse home in the country. And so since then, it's blossomed. We do have 12 different locations, all in Mississippi, and we do have 19 greenhouses. And now I'm going to let Julie talk with you about her location. Julie, as I guess Susan said, is the executive director for Martha Coker Homes, which is a facility that is all greenhouse locations in Yazoo City, Mississippi. And Julie's going to talk with you about Martha Coker and what they've been doing with their greenhouses.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Julie. Martha Coker is located in a rural Delta town. We've got about 11,000 people in our city. And we partnered with Methodist Senior Services, and in 2007 started a capital campaign. And then we opened our first 3 greenhouses in 2008, and then the spring of 2009, our other 3 greenhouses. So we have 6 greenhouses now. Again, like Merrin said, we are a elder-driven. We are work really hard to meet the needs of our elders every day, to let them enjoy their life and have a wonderful quality of life. Some of the challenges that we have, and I'm sure that's why many of you are on this webinar today, is staff. Finding the right people to work for your companies. Since we are a small town, our challenge has been we are 45 miles from our state capital, Jackson, Mississippi. So a lot of people travel daily to work in the Jackson area. Finding qualified employees to work here, and also we're in competition with pay. Everyone wants more money, and so we're in competition with that. So those are some of our #1 challenges that we have.
Thank you, Julie. So as we get into the measurements that we are seeing with Martha Coker employees in particular, I wanted to give some backdrop to how it is that Hollaran measures employee engagement. So we talk a lot in our surveys about benchmark. You can see here that we have just under 60,000 employee surveys that Martha Coker would be compared to as we talk about the employee benchmark. So those are primarily nonprofit organizations that do the continuum of care across the nation. So that allows us to really identify what senior living specific employees are feeling and how the organization measures up in comparison to the benchmark. When we look at the survey tool, there are 25 factors or statements that we list on our survey tool. 15 of those come together to create what you see here off to the right-hand side called the Employee Engagement Index. So those 15 engagement factors, then we decipher how the employees are falling into different elements and categories here that we list off to the side. So we often talk about the orange zone. Those are employees who are highly engaged. So you can see we list them as catalysts and advocates. And really, those are the individual employees who are coming in every day, and they are your cheerleaders and your change agents. They are excited about the opportunity to be there. And when somebody hands them a policy and procedure, they are going to be your employees who are going to push back and say, you know what, this is a great administrative policy and procedure, but if we could tweak just a couple things here, we could also reap some efficiencies directly on the floor. So those are your individual employees who are constantly thinking about how do we make it better and how do we make change happen. Then you have middle employees who fall into that blue zone, and we list them as endorsers and contributors. They are your individual staff workers who show up absolutely every day, and I often refer to this group as your taskmasters. So we absolutely need these individuals within our ranks and roles. They're the individuals who are going to come in and have a list of 7 things that need to get done, and they're going to make sure that they are all accomplished by the end of the day. But they're really not going to think forward about what the task is that they're doing and how that might have an implication on something in the next shift, that if we addressed it differently, we could create an easier workflow for everybody the whole way around. They are just doing what they are told to do and getting it done. So again, how we find the percentage of these individuals coming into our communities as employees, that's really what we're looking to measure here. And then finally, we have what we call resistors. And those are individuals who fall within what we refer to here at Hollaran as that Mr. Yuck category. Those are the individuals who come in every day and really push back against progress. They're the ones that say, we can't make that happen, we've tried it before. They're employees who are much more toxic in nature, and so they're creating an environment of negativity. And what we want to do is understand how each one of these groupings measure up as you look at your staff and you look at those 15 engagement factors. So we're looking to identify the percentage of the teams that are falling within these categories to then know how we can create an enhanced environment if we change up some things. Another thing that's going to be important before we go into Martha Coker's response rate here is that you understand our average response rate in the Hollaran benchmark. So we have a variety of different methodologies. On average, employee surveys are conducting online surveys, and we typically reap a 73% response rate from those employees. So that tells you a little bit about all the communities that we're working with, and those 60,000 surveys, we're getting right around the 73% response rate. So that really tees us up to talk specifically about what we are seeing in the Martha Coker survey. So MSS does their employee surveys with us, and one of the things we'll be looking at here in particular is just what occurred at the Martha Coker location. Martha Coker had 73 employees who were eligible to take the last survey that we conducted with them, and they received 100% response rate. Let me just tell you, as we reflect on the fact that 73% is the average response rate that we get from online surveys, I can't even tell you the last time I saw 100% response rate. And so obviously, as you think about really understanding the makeup of what's happening in that culture, the more voices that you hear, the better your action plans are, and you're really positive that you're focused in the right areas. So to have 100% response rate, like I said, really not seen very often here, and just stellar to get to know exactly what everybody's voice was saying. So at Martha Coker, out of those 25 factors or statements that we ask, again, 15 of them aggregated together give us the engagement index and help us reflect on engagement in particular. The other 10 out of those 25 factors are satisfaction. So talking about competitive wage, those types of things where you really need to understand from a basic needs scenario how the employees are feeling. So to tell you a little bit about how incredible the results were here, 22 out of those 25 factors for Martha Coker employees statistically increased over the past 3-year survey. So almost every single factor we are seeing going up, and the other 3 that are out there aren't far behind, but weren't statistically increased, but are going up. Another component here to reflect on the fact that out of the entire survey, every single one of the factors here that was completed landed in the 98th or 99th percentile of the Hollaran benchmark. So every single one of their factors falling in that top echelon, it's almost impossible to get any higher than what we are seeing in their rankings. And I know that Julie reflected on competitive wage and the fact that they have some challenges just being competitive because Jackson is so close. If you look at what they scored on the factor that asked employees how they felt about competitive wage, again, they landed in the 99th percentile for how the employees are feeling about wage as compared to the Hollaran benchmark. Out of a 1 through 5 scale, their competitive wage was rated at a 4.53. So even competitive wage that we know is a challenge in this area for them to secure, the employees are saying, you're meeting our needs. So as we reflect on that employee engagement index and the amount of employees out of those 15 engagement factors that we ask, you are seeing here what their scores were collectively for those engagements, those 15 engagement questions correlated together for an average score. Again, it's on a scale of 1 through 5. So in the survey 3 years ago, 4.23 was their average score out of 5. We saw a dramatic increase to 4.43 in their next survey. And this year, their survey came in at a 4.75 for their engagement index. Let me reflect a little bit about what that means. That means 90% of the 73 employees within their community are responding as highly engaged employees. For this 2019 figure, if you look at the Hollaran benchmark, the midpoint of our Hollaran benchmark is a 4.01. So again, just scoring off the charts in comparison to our Hollaran benchmark. Other things that I look for in the Hollaran benchmark is the levels of engagement within departments specifically. As you can imagine, oftentimes we see larger amounts of resistors coming in from both the nursing team and the dining team. So that's always one of the first places that I go to really understand what's happening in the community itself. So when we broke down Martha Coker's results by department, their nursing services department yielded a highly engaged category of 86.7% of the department was considered highly engaged. And to put that into some context, what we see in the average of the Hollaran benchmark is that 43.1% of nursing departments typically respond as being highly engaged. So just seeing very unusual results here. And one of the opportunities that we want to give to Julie and to Merrin is to talk about what is that secret sauce and how is that coming out differently from what they're seeing in their results to what we're seeing in the Hollaran benchmark. So Julie, I wanted to give some space today to talk about, you know, even when you start looking for that employee, what are some of the attributes that you're looking for? And let's talk about when you start even mentioning what's important at Martha Coker and what employees can expect to see. So why don't you tell us a little bit about just even finding the right employees?
Okay. When we receive an application, one of the things we do look at is seeing if that employee is moving around a lot, like staying in a location maybe a year or two, and kind of look at that. We also do a really good job of, our HR does a really good job of really calling up the former employees to try to find out good information about, if they can, about that employee. But an interview process is something that employers really need to take the time. I sit in personally with all of the interviews. There's two things that I really look at is body language. I ask the first question I ask in the interview, after I introduce myself, I always shake that person's hand. I ask them to tell me something about yourself. And so that gives me a good feel of how this possible employee or candidate could, I guess what you would say would be engaged with the elders. I also take them down to our houses for a tour to see how they interact with our elders and our staff, to see if they're really here and see an opportunity to grow or if they're just here for a paycheck. So I think your interview process is very important. We set a standard when we talk to the new applicants. We talk to them about what our standard is. and how it's a privilege to work for this organization. We talk to them about the benefits that are received here. We have excellent benefits. And so that's the number one thing that we do before we even hire someone. Sometimes we do not get it right. I will be honest with you. We've hired people that will be here 3 months or 6 months, and they're not the right employee. You've got to, as an employer, be able to try to coach, to try to help them grow and be successful. But if they're not able to grow with your team, with their team, and with our organization and what we stand for, at times they're asked to leave.
Okay, thank you. What are some of the other markers of an ideal candidate?
Okay, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the ideal markers that you're looking for when you think about that ideal candidate? What are some of the other elements that you are looking at as you're interviewing?
Okay, well, we have an Insight worldwide tool that we use that asks several questions and helps us, and it helps it score that applicant. We look at that very closely. We have basically 16 questions that we, in depth, that we talk to an applicant about. You know, those are the things that we are now using that helps us try to find the right person.
Mm-hmm. And Julie, you mentioned about, you know, whether or not how you see success in somebody that comes from that traditional retirement background, people who have experience in that versus people who don't. What are you seeing really has the best success there?
The best success is we have seen here at Martha Coker, if they are a new certified nursing assistant, because that is the number one qualification for them to even be interviewed, to make sure they have a valid certification. If someone has worked in the traditional nursing home for a very long period of time, they are not able to adjust to be empowered to be self-managed. It's much harder to coach those employees that have been in a traditional nursing home for a long time.
It sounds like you take the interview process incredibly seriously, and some of the challenges that I've heard from organizations across the nation is just what happens in the time that it takes to interview somebody and interview somebody well, and how quickly people are picking up other positions, and how you can often lose a good candidate if you take a little bit too long. So what is the time frame from the interview process to the hire process? Do you know an average of how long that typically takes?
Well, an interview process, it can sometimes be hour to 2 hours actually talking to that applicant. As far as actually going through the process of the orientation, it's over a week to really get all the paperwork in. And then some employees take longer to train in the houses, to adapt to all the different job responsibilities they have. So it really depends on the employee. Some employees, it could be 4 or 5 days until you let them be in the house without someone side by side with them. Now they're with another coworker, of course, but I'm talking about having a mentor with them. Sometimes it might take 2 weeks to mentor them, but if you do not train correctly and go back and talk to them and make sure that employee is comfortable in what they're doing, then you're not going to be successful, because they're going to be frustrated and they're going to leave within 2 or 3 weeks if they feel that they're overwhelmed with the new responsibilities, because it is so different in the greenhouses because they are empowered to work with their team. And so you've got to give them the right tools. They, of course, go through a Shabazz or Shabazine class, a culinary class, and sometimes it does take maybe a month or so to get those classes completed. They have a lot of reliance learning they have to go through, a lot of training. But we feel the investment in time that we do with that is worth it because you want your employees to grow and be longevity.
Right. Great. Thank you. So why don't we spend a few minutes talking about where you focus your time as being the leader there at Martha Coker and you know, how that timing is spent from your average day.
Okay. To be honest, I have an agenda for each day and it never gets completed because the elders and the employees come first over the paperwork. You cannot stay in your office all day and not meet the needs of your elders and your staff. Mm-hmm. If I have a staff member, I'll give you an example. I had a staff member at 5:30 yesterday call me and said, we've got some concerns in the house, you know, and I really need you to come down and talk to some of the elders. And I immediately got up and went and addressed it. I think employees need to be heard, and you see every one of their concerns, or if you want to look at the word complaint, as a concern. Even with the elders, I always look at a complaint as a concern because I have a concern about something. And so as a manager or as the executive director, and I'm also the guide, it is important that I go and investigate or meet with the staff what their concerns are. And usually an investigation is completed within 3 days, but if they have a concern with something that's going on in the house, I need to go and talk to whatever I need to do to meet that concern. Because if an employee feels like you are not listening to them, they feel like you do not care. And so if I cannot meet with them, I would at least send some type of response to the employee of what I'm doing to try to make it better. You do not always get a win-win. If you have an elder that's having a behavior problem in the house and the staff is saying, you know, we've got problems in this house and we've done everything we can do, we cannot always meet that need if that's the concern that they have, which is a great concern. But you have to let the staff know that you're listening. And I spend a lot of time communicating with families and employees and elders every day.
You know, I think the interesting component to this is how engaging your staff in this way really then overlays into how engaged the residents and their families are as well. We are seeing an absolute connection to the engagement of the employees versus the engagement of how the residents are experiencing their engagement as well. And we are absolutely seeing a correlation between the two, and you cannot deny them. And so, you know, I'm not sure if anybody gasped when they saw this point that Jolie spends 90% of her time connecting with the people in her community, but we are seeing this over and over and over again in our results as well. Even when I look at how resident engagement overlays into this. So in one particular circumstance, we were working with a multi-site who the engagement of the residents was extremely high, but what we knew about that community is that they were struggling with some operational issues. So financially, the community wasn't super successful. And then their sister community actually had the reverse taking place, where resident engagement was extremely low, but what was happening is that financially it was being run at top notch. It was the most successful community in this portfolio. And as I talked with the operations officer, you know, it became really evident that the community that was experiencing high engagement from their residents, the ED was spending a lot of time out with those residents, making sure that there was relationship happening. And so the residents were incredibly engaged, where the other community that was running solid from an operational standpoint, the ED was in the office almost the entire time and the residents couldn't connect. And there is an absolute connection to administration accessibility that is a key element in increasing engagement both with the employees and with the residents. But it's challenging for us as leaders to segment our time and get out of the office. But what we're seeing in the research is that it is absolutely ideal to do in order to enhance engagement, which engagement is all about relationship. Relationship is all about loyalty and really keeping that great tenure of staff that is going to take you to a whole nother level. And so that is coming out more and more in our research as we look at both resident and employee engagement. Julie, the other thing that you talked to me about was how deliberate you are about team recognition. And I know a lot of communities struggle with that. Again, there can often be what is considered a flavor of the month, and that, you know, is active, and team recognition is really solid during that particular time, and then it falls off a little bit, and you can see engagement wane as the recognition wanes. You know, what is it that you're doing to make team recognition a really deliberate part of your success?
We have tokens, and what these tokens are, little go tokens. It says, "We appreciate you." It's like a helping hand on it. And so what we try to do is recognize in employees when they go over and beyond, or just give them a token for coming to work and having a smile on their face. Mm-hmm. And even though it doesn't cost a lot of money, it has been a very big success. And what I have in my office is I have a treasure chest. And once the employees earn 10 tokens, they come to the office and get something out of the treasure chest. And even though that might sound a little silly to some people, it has been just remarkable results from this, because it just makes them feel good that they can get a happy, or they've done something that's over and beyond. Sometimes we ignore the employees that come to work every day on time. You never have them in the office. You never get a complaint or concern or anything. And they're really, really good employees. But sometimes you don't recognize those employees like you should. And so we try to make a special effort to give them the coins or tokens. Once they receive them and they get so many, they actually get a gift card at our local Walmart. We have a Walmart few feet over, and just take a picture of them and put it on the wall when they meet their goals and call them star employees. It's those little things that really make an employee feel appreciative. I mean, it's just made a big difference with our staff. They love it. They just absolutely love it.
So is there somebody in particular in charge of that team recognition? Do you take that lead? Is there another member of your team who takes that lead?
Okay, the entire campus, if let's say an employee worked for another employee because that person needed to be off, they can write a appreciation slip, and it comes to me, and I always write on it, "Way to go," and put my initial on it, and we give them a coin with the slip that says, like, "Thank you so much for working for me," or "Thank you for switching a day out for me," or "Thank you for helping me today because I was struggling or I was behind on doing something." So it lets the employees praise each other, not just their supervisors or their clinical support team. It just gives everybody a chance to say thank you for, being my teammate, or just anything. Family members can complete it. I will look at staff that comes in 5 minutes early before their shift, kind of recognize that. They might get here 1 minute before the shift, but I kind of look at that and making sure that they're relaxed learning, they're staying up with their in-services, and just different reasons we give them the tokens. It can be anything, but it can come from anyone on the campus. Other employees, family members, just anyone.
That's fabulous. I see many organizations who team recognition is driven primarily out of the HR department. And it's not, engagement isn't just about the HR department. And while they can be the keepers of some of that from the engagement standpoint, it really is important that everyone's bought in to the engagement. And I think it's essential for team members to know that engagement isn't about necessarily what management can do for them, but engagement is what we talk about all the time being a two-way street. And so if, there are team members who are frustrated because they feel like they don't have a voice, well, I'm also asking you to step up and have a voice, and you are providing that through the lens of recognition, and we'll also talk about that here in a minute around crucial conversations and how that takes place out in your community as well. But I think for those of you on the phone, it's really important that there isn't just one group or one department leading this. That part of the secret sauce at Martha Coker is the fact that it's an element that everybody takes ownership of, and that's really what will lead to great success around engagement. So we have spent a good amount of our time here today talking about the success and talking about what we're seeing in your year-over-year results, and we can tell that your team is really incredibly engaged. But what we also know is that there's probably still areas that you want to conquer yet. So let's spend a few moments talking about turnover. Merrin, I know from you being, the VP of HR here and what you see at other communities, would you guide us through a little bit of what you're seeing out from a turnover perspective at Martha Coker, and then, maybe some insights as to what you're seeing at other locations and how you are working on the turnover issue?
Sure. Martha Coker in 2018, the turnover overall for the year was right at 33%. And that does include full-time, part-time, casual PRN employees. This year, into third quarter for 2019, it is at 22%. So we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed that by the end of the year, it will be, have decreased for the year over 2018. And I think that is a tribute to Julie and her staff in how they have systematically put in place some interview techniques, some interview skills to get the right person in the job, to make sure they're going to be a good fit, make sure they are engaging with the elders, engaging with the staff, all the things that she's mentioned that she does when she actually interviews folks. But also, I think it's a tribute to the environment. This is a small town, so Martha Coker is very, very well known in the community, and also the reputation is very well known. So most of our referrals for new hires obviously come from other employees and people who enjoy working here and are referring their friends and so on. But that comes from the reputation that Julie and her staff and Martha Coker have really built over the years. And so anyway, so I think it's just a matter of Julie continuing to work the process, continuing to try and find new ways, and she is limited, as she mentioned, Yazoo City is a small community and a rural community. So we're always, Julie and I are always kind of talking about new and different ways to perhaps try and find people that would be good candidates for our positions, whether that be connect with the schools in the communities, of course, Facebook, bringing people in that way, the internet, other internet sites, referrals and referral sources. But anyway, so those are some of the things we're working on. Obviously, turnover is never good. Some turnover is good. If you don't get the right person, sometimes it's inevitable. But anyway, they're really doing a great job on turnover, and we're keeping our fingers crossed as to how we finish up the year. But it's looking about, I'm hoping that's going to be less than what it was in 2018.
Wonderful. So Julie, one of the things that you and I talked about earlier as we were prepping for this is that, you do have those moments where the model is really set up about the team being empowered to self-manage. So what is it that you need to do if that isn't happening, and how do you interject in those moments?
Okay. Whenever we have a team that's not working together, or even an employee that we have concerns with, we will either, myself, or I do have a coach that does help me, which is a direct supervisor as well. We will go to that employee or employees and coach them. We do not write them up. We coach them. We do put something in writing, but we explain to them that we are here to coach them and help them be the best employee they can be. Now, at times, we have people that are not coachable. And so after that time, if the concern continues, we write them up as a verbal warning. And then if that continues, as I say, some people are asked to leave. But you've got to be consistent in what you do, because you can never look at, it'd be just too inconvenient to let that person go. I need a warm body here to work. If you do that, you're lowering your standard of what your expectation is for your employees to be. So you really need to sometimes look at those employees that you sometimes see that are here just for the paycheck, and they really don't care anything about the elders, that they're just not the right fit for us. And so you try to coach them, and as you coach them, you talk to them about how they were empowered to be self-managed, and being self-managed comes a lot of responsibility and accountability, and that is what the expectation is. And if they are not going to be empowered, then unfortunately I would have to come in and empower, and I don't want to do that. And so I give them a week or two to try to straighten out their problems if they have something going on between the team members, because not everybody gets along. And so you just have to set that standard of what your expectation is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listen to a podcast often. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it, but it's called Coaching for Leaders, and it's a weekly podcast. And this week, General Jim Mattis was a part of the podcast, and it was interesting because he reflected in that episode that he could command in 15 minutes a day, but the rest of his time was spent coaching. And this is, someone who had extreme success in 4 decades with the Marines. And so you are saying exactly what he is saying, is that coaching is just a key element. And I think it just takes so much time out of our days that sometimes we think it'd just be easier to direct and to tell people exactly what to do. But that model simply isn't sustainable, and we're seeing that over and over and over again in different forms of research, that it really is about how you coach and how you, can
Yes.
just really empower the team.
I agree. And one of the things is you are constantly coaching and teaching and training. And everyone is different on the way they learn something. Some people are more on hands, and your approach does have to be different at times, but you still got to be fair. One thing I forgot to mention to you also, we're working on an employee recognition committee, and that is asking employees, we're not letting them volunteer to be on this committee to see what we can do to make our facility the best, even though we want this to be the best place for elders to grow old or live here. We want to be the employer of choice. We want everybody to want to come here and work here. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to work on, and giving our employees a chance to have a say on what we could do better, like maybe in scheduling. Maybe they could work their schedules differently, or have those opportunities to do those things and have a say in what can make their job better here.
Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. You know, what you're saying really resonates. My new favorite book is Culture Code by Daniel Cole, and he does nothing but evaluating successful groups such as yourself, and what is it that is happening with these individual groups that is really just creating a culture that is unsurpassed. And so it's great when we're seeing other models like yourself where you are just seeing such success. And again, it's because of your secret sauce. So with that being said, we are at the end of our time together today. Susan mentioned that she wanted to give some time for questions. So I'm not sure if anyone has any for us, but we want to open up now to give some space for questions from the audience.
Wow, that was incredible. And I think you started it, Nikki, with talking about finding the secret sauce. And I would say that we've discovered a lot of that secret sauce. And to kind of build on the greenhouse mantras, it's all about relationships and it's all about leadership. And Julie and Merrin, I mean, you both have really talked about some really significant things that leaders can do to have an impact on their workforce. So let's move to some of the questions. How in the world, this is a great question, how in the world did you get a 100% response rate on a survey? And what's the timeline from source to hire? Two questions, but really good questions.
Well, we offered a gift card of $100 and then two $50 gift cards. And then we had signs everywhere. And I have every employee's telephone number in my cell phone. And so I would text out, I have them in different groups. And I would text out, please come do a survey. You might win money, come do a survey. So that really encouraged the employees to come out and participate in the survey.
This is Merrin. Can I also add too that most of our campuses do written surveys. So that's an opportunity to get employees together, to have an engagement event, engagement party, if you will, and broken down by shift or by department, whatever. And then, you know, most of our campuses have some sort of drawing, as Julie mentioned, for, you know, everybody that attends, their name goes into a hat and they get, you know, a chance to win a $100 gift card. But we have had very good success with the written ones where employees come in and enjoy time together and actually do their actual survey as opposed to online. That's just the way we have chosen to do it company-wide.
And,
right,
you know,
so
one of the things from my perspective, too, is that Steve McAlilly, the CEO and president, he is very vocal about wanting to make sure that they get really high response rates, too. So while Martha Coker had 100%, most of the other communities weren't far behind. Merrin, correct me if I'm wrong, but you might have had a couple other communities that were at 100% too. So this is a corporate driven initiative that they really want to make sure that they're hearing from everybody, and it's high response rates from all of their communities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, that's
what was the other
impressive.
question? I'm sorry.
The timeline from source to hire. So I'm assuming from interview to when you make the hire.
Usually a week. Yeah, usually a week.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
You do not want to lose that person to another company. And so we try to stay in touch with them to let them know, sometimes when we do the background checks or your fingerprinting, and it takes, sometimes it comes back in 2 days, sometimes it might take 4 or 5 days. So we try to stay in touch with them and always give them our number to stay in touch with us, to let them know that we're interested, but sometimes things cause it to be a little delayed. But our HR person, basically, we could hire someone today, and by next week, she could have them going through orientation with all the paperwork. So about a week.
Okay. So does HR and the supervisors coach teams notable to manage themselves? Merrin said, we coach any individual or team who is not making expectations.
Yes. Julie said that. Yes.
Okay.
You have to coach. You cannot let things just keep going the way they are if it's not what your standard is. You've got to set your standard, and you've got to let your employees know what the standard is. I always say our standard is high, and it's always been high since Martha Coker opened. There was the first nursing home in the state of Mississippi. It was built in 1961. And always had a high standard and a high reputation. And once we partnered with Methodist Senior Services, that standard remained the same. And Methodist Senior Services has always had a high standard of the care that we give our elders and the employees that work with us or for us.
So can you share a situation in which you were able to coach someone to a new behavior?
Yes, I have many. I could go all day. We had an employee that I personally saw potential in. She was very young employee by age. She was in her early 20s, and she really wanted to do things her way. And so I was having concerns with her from the staff. And so I just spent some time with her and myself and told her that I wanted her to grow to be a phenomenal employee here and to stay here, because we've invested a lot of money. You do invest a lot of money when you hire a person up front. You invest with all the paperwork you have to do, and the fingerprinting and the drug test and the background checks. And free, their health insurance is at no cost here. And so you do invest a lot of money. And so it took about a year for, even though she wasn't doing anything really wrong, but she just needed to have a lot of coaching on some of her thinking skills or her processes of what she was doing. And so I just had to coach her and keep encouraging her that I saw a lot of potential in her. After 3 years, she became a licensed nurse. She was a certified nursing assistant and became a licensed nurse and is still here today. She's a phenomenal employee. And it just takes time to help grow your staff. Sometimes your employees need a little help. And sometimes it has to do with their own personal life. And you do have to understand sometimes people have not had the opportunity to be the best they can be because nobody's given them a chance. So I think when you really see potential in an employee and you see that they really want to grow, and you just got to work with them and coach them and coach them and coach them, it's worth it in the long run because you have a very loyal employee, very dedicated employee, and they're going to take better care of the elders than anybody else because they understand that we care about them. I have a very open door policy. Even when I'm on vacation, my staff can get in touch with me. But I have a very open door policy, and I think if staff knows that, they can come in my office and talk to me when they're frustrated about something. They have the right to do that. And I think you've got to have that open communication with your employees.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your experiences and your overwhelming success. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Merrin, for sharing your incredible examples of what's possible. And we are so thrilled that Michelle Hollaran, the CEO for Hollaran Consulting, and Steve McAlilly, the CEO for Methodist Senior Services, are on our board. And we are grateful for their contributions and for what they have been able to share with us. Very quickly, we've got 7 greenhouse workshops coming across the country in 2020, from Washington, D.C. to Pompano Beach, Florida, to Rhode Island, to Vancouver, to Longmont, Colorado, to Detroit, Michigan, and Columbia, Maryland. So they will be listed on our website, and so please, if you have not been to a greenhouse home, you'll want to make sure you'll take that seeing is believing experience. And last but not least, please make sure, if you haven't already, follow us on our new Facebook page. We have gone to a new page, and that's what it looks like, and we want to stay connected with you. Thanks again to our incredible panel and for your amazing stories that you've shared. I took a page full of notes, and we will be thinking about how to have you back. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful
Bye.
day.